Yeah, thank you, Rick. I'm Adam. I'm part of my role here at the CBU is to support web-based methods and online testing. Um, 15 down, one to go, so hopefully you're still with us, but you can always watch the fly go across the screen if this isn't for you. So what I'm going to cover today is start off with why test online. It seems obvious, but it's good to outline what we can gain from it. Which online methods do we support here at the CBU? Is the data good enough quality, i.e. does it replicate what you could achieve in the lab? And I'm going to focus most of the talk on best practices to ensure getting the best data quality online. So, as I say, some of these are self-evident, but one of the main advantages of online doing cognitive or behavioural tests is it reduces the amount of time it takes to recruit and test your participants. There's numerous participant pools out there, such as Prolific or Mechanical Turk, which provides global reach, but also means you can get your participants really quickly. And it also has the advantage of such a large number of thousands of participants. You can get a specific sample from across the world relatively quickly, say if you're looking for high music proficiency. The drawbacks are being mitigated, which I'll hopefully discuss later on. And there are more and more lab-based results being replicated with online versions of the study. There's numerous ones out there, but this is just a relatively recent one that I thought I'd pull out. This is a categorical learning and decision-making task in both the auditory and visual domain. This was run on Gorilla, which is one of the online testing platforms out there. Just a brief summary of what it shows. They could only get 30 participants in person, but 99 online. It took a month versus 48 hours, so highlighting that advantage. And I won't go into details of what the study was, but just focusing on the patterns of the plots here, you can see there's in-person and the online replication in both the auditory and visual domain, and the pattern results are strikingly similar. So there are various other ones out there, so I would advise if you've got a particular question of interest, look if somebody has been able to replicate it successfully online. So the big ones, a lot of you may know this, but for those that aren't aware, at the CBU, we do have JTOS, which is just another tool for online studies. I'll discuss these more on the next slides. We have Gorilla, which is another platform that we have a site-wide license for. And then if you're interested in surveys, the University of Cambridge also has a Qualtrics license. So all these three things are available to you if you want to use them. So a brief rundown of what JTOS is. Essentially, it's just an online platform where you can put your cognitive or behavioral experiments. It's made up of JavaScript, HTML, and CSS code that's packaged into this JTOS code, which is a relatively simple bit that you put at the start at the end, but the main body of it is the HTML, which is the building blocks of the web page, and the CSS, which is the styling. The JavaScript, which is the language that we most commonly use to generate dynamic content, which is important if you're doing behavioral experiments. Now, you don't have to be super proficient in these codes because various toolboxes have already been made that package up some of the JavaScript commands. A good example of that is JSPsych, but JTOS also supports numerous other ones, such as OpenSesame, lab.js, which, as I say, are sort of commands that are packaged up bits of JavaScript that you can just put in a line and relatively easy run on JTOS. It's free and open source, which is obviously big for the CBU's mission. Easy to link to the online participant pools I talked about before, such as Prolific. And one of the big things, this is already set up on the CBU server. So it's internal, it's in-house. We have control over the data storage and access. There's multiple previous CBU experiments, so you don't have to build this all from the beginning. And it's one of the ones that I have most experience with, so it's supported by me. So me, you, and JTOS will have a nice time off together. There you go. Everyone loves unnecessary animation. So just to give you an idea more what it looks like physically, you'll use whatever code writer that you want to use up in the top left. And then on the bottom right, you see the online portal. You can download a version for your local version on your desktop to test these things. And when it's ready to go online, upload it to the CBU server. And you can see each one of the elements of this particular experiment, instructions, practice, run 1, 2, 3, 4, has its own HTML script with JavaScript inside it, and you can download the results for each individual one or export them as a JSON altogether. So Gorilla is something that is less used in the department, but it's something that we do have a license for, and more people are starting to use it. One of the advantages of this is if you've got less coding experience, it's a drag and drop way of coding experiments. It has nice things such as version control. If you have collaborators around the world, you can all log into your experiment and make modifications without having to send emails back and forth or Dropboxes back and forth. As I say, it suits the people with less coding experience in JavaScript. I've done experiments in Gorilla before, and it's very easy to make it pretty without much work. But if you do want to add more complex JavaScript elements, you can sort of hack into the drag and drop thing and actually write the specific code if you want, so it's not precluding that. And also it's got nice things like you can upload your trial order just as a simple CSV, upload straight away, it's ready to go, rather than having to make any other sort of arrays or anything like that. It is hosted externally, but it meets a lot of the safety checks that you would need for data storage. And this again, just to see what it looks like, on the right-hand side, you can see the drag and drop elements where you sort of drop in different components to do something. You can do counterbalancing and control and lots of things like that. I went over those fairly quickly because there's a lot of materials and tutorials online about how to do that. But this is what I wanted to focus most of my talk on today. I saw a nice talk by Andrew Gordon, who's somebody from Prolific, at the Be Online conference. And he outlined from his experience at Prolific some of the best ways to get good quality data online. So I thought that would be a good way to structure this talk. So unsurprisingly, someone Prolific did lead off with pick the strongest recruitment platform. Unsurprisingly, Prolific did win. But one of the big, there is data to back this up. The opt-in panels, such as Qualtrics, Toluna, Diata, where essentially you can just, in 5 minutes, go on, sign up, and be doing an experiment straight away. There is these research by Harmony Research and Grey Matter Research that found that 46% of the opt-in panel sample participants were bogus, so from bot farms or click farms. So it is quite important to pick your participant platform well. And Prolific is one of the better ones out there. It does certain things like participant verification, so you have to wait before you can start. They've got verifications of things like IP and phone numbers to know that your participants are good. And Prolific constantly updates the trust score and kicks out participants who keep just clicking or signing up and failing experiments. So they are vetted. And this is a study by Peer et al. That sort of shows this in data. They used this composite metric of attention, comprehension, reliability, and honesty across various ones of the participant platforms. And it would seem that Prolific does outperform most of the other participant pools in these metrics. So Prolific is a good way to get your participants. Secondly, validate your participants in your actual experiment. Don't just rely on the criteria that you're putting on the advert. It sounds obvious, but quite often people who want to just get the money for the study will say they agree to, they are of the demographics you're looking for. So a good way of rechecking that is to see if the information matches what they have on their Prolific. So just put a question in your study. So for example, if you're looking at mobile phone usage for women aged 20 to 30, sounds obvious, but put those questions at the start of your experiment. So you're re-asking these pre-screening requirements in your experiment. Now, the main body of this one, as you might imagine, is design your study effectively. So here are some points that Andrew outlined based on his experience. Use effective attention checks. Now, some points here, have more than one if your trial allows, to make sure that not one measure of attention is necessarily going to make sure that people are continuing to pay attention throughout your whole experiment. So have more than one and use more than one different one if possible. One of the big things, and I'll show you some data on the next slide to back this up, is don't use instructional manipulation checks. So this is the most common one that people often use. So it's, for example, in your experiment, something will come up saying, please select the blue square, and click your blue square. Apparently, too easy to do for people not paying attention and also for bots. Don't use maths or general knowledge questions or test memory for retention checks. Again, it sounds obvious, but even if you're asking the most simple question, you're relying on the person to know who the Prime Minister is, and it's not always there. So the ones that were suggested, and again, I'll show you a plot to back this up on the next slide, is nonsensical checks and trap questions are the best ways to check attention just to make sure people are still attending to whatever your task is online. So, for example, nonsensical checks is put the statement, how much do you agree with the statement? I currently work 25 hours a day, or I swim across the Atlantic to work every day. And although sometimes it might feel like that, those are not true. So if people are not answering that with I strongly agree with these statements, you could use that as a vetting criteria afterwards. And trap questions are quite good. So this is, you embed, if you are using Likert scales, embed actually in one of your answers an instruction. So that says, please tick strongly agree. So whatever their actual question is, they're supposed to be ignoring that and just looking at the instruction, please tick to agree. And some data to back up how these nonsensical checks and trap questions are more important than, or better than the instructional manipulation checks, like please select blue. This was, again, a study that Andrew Gordon presented. And as you can see, the IMCs, everyone passes, including bad actors. Whereas if you look at the nonsensical checks and the trap questions, you see a drop on both platforms, the grey bars MTurk and the orange bars Prolific. But surprisingly, MTurk, the participants are actually a lot worse than the Prolific participants. But even in Prolific, these ones are catching some of the attention. So yeah, don't use IMCs apparently. So some other things to design a good online study, always use at least one text-free response. I'll explain that why in the next slide. Include duplicate questions, multiple responses. Quite obviously, if they don't repeat the same answer in your attention check, then you'll remove you can remove inattentive participants and bots. There's a paper out there by Tom Zakatal that outlined the top 10 participant filters on gorillas. And this was things like only use participants with an approval rate of above 97%. And there was a list of things that got good data. And collect page timing data. I'll explain this more on the next slide, but it's a really good way of checking participant attention within the course of a task. So examine your data correctly. Again, this might be a good way to kick out bad participants or inattentive participants or bots. Analyze the time that participants take on each page. So if your participants significantly speeding up or slowing down during the course of the experiment, assuming that your experiment is not designed to get more challenging as it goes along, that's a very good metric of them just clicking because they're getting bored or starting to look at other web pages because they're getting bored towards the end. So a good sanity check is to check that. Look at, again, similar sort of idea, look at the change in length and detail in the free text responses. If you are taking free text responses and they suddenly start going from stories to one-word answers, again, it might be a sign that they're giving up. And there's some packages out there, so you don't have to do this manually. For example, in R, there is RM and Snowball C that look at the detail of these free text responses. And this one is a big problem, obviously, coming into the future. Use signs of large language models. Obviously, that's not, it's easier said than done, but there's certain things like if you're looking for paragraph answers and there's only one keystroke measured, it's probably because they've copied and pasted it from somewhere, be that from a language model or just copying some other answer. So match up the length of the response to the number of keystrokes. OpenAI did have a tool, actually, to look at whether they thought some text came from a language model, but they've actually pulled that because it wasn't good enough. Well, they weren't happy with the quality of it. It was doing 20% true positives, but that's been removed. But that presumably will come again. And you can record things quite easily online, like IP addresses. So if you look for duplicate IP addresses, if the set of 50 participants are coming from the same IP address, it's a chance that it might be a click farm, people just looking for the money. And a quite obvious one to finish on, treat your participants fairly. You know, if they're engaged in the study, they're more likely to stick with it. Check things like the going payment rate, don't underpay. If you can increase stimulus variety, there was a study by, I can't pronounce that, showed that breaks in stimulus chains do significantly increase continued engagement. So I have maybe in the last minute or so, I wanted to cover this one before I went, because timing worries are one of the biggest things that people often cite in terms of not wanting to do an online study, so reaction times or stimulus presentation times. And this is some, on the next slide I'll show some work by Alex Irvin, ex of this, late of this parish, about timing worries across different platforms. But basically, this is a good way of thinking about it. In a dream world, you'd want the bottom right corner, high accuracy and high precision in your reaction times. But we know that if you are going to use computers in random different places across the world with different processing powers and different browsers, you are going to maybe lose accuracy. But one of the things we want to maintain is precision. So with the online testing, can we achieve the top right-hand corner, where there will be delays, but the variability across the different computers or browsers, how bad is that? Do different participants going to give us bad data because of that? So this was, as I say, a paper by Alex Irvin, and it's quite a nice paper looking across reaction times and stimulus presentation times on Windows, on desktops, on laptops, on Macs, and across different internet browsers, and also across different online testing platforms. So you can see in the plots we've got 4 leading ones there: Gorilla, and if you remember the bottom 3, JPsych, LabJS, and CycleJS, are all things that you can incorporate into JTOS. And the basic take-home is if your experiment doesn't care about reaction times or presentation times below 100 milliseconds, there is no worry to be had. All of them generally, no matter what combination you use, go below that. In the top plot, this paper's got lots of graphs, but this is just looking at reaction times and how much of a delay we see across devices, platforms, operating systems, and this idea of accuracy and precision, you can see in both Gorilla and JPsych, there is a little bit of a delay in the reaction times, but what was nice to really highlight was the standard deviation across all the different platforms or operating servers. Gorilla is only about 8.25 milliseconds and JPsych 15.27, so there's not that much variability. And certain browser operating system pairings work a lot better than others. So if you really care about your reaction times, what seems to come out best is Windows Desktop and Chrome. You can get these down to maybe somewhere between 40 and 60 milliseconds, which is good. And you can put browser checks in at the start of your experiment if you really want to filter out these sort of things. So that's all I really wanted to cover today. As I say, if you are interested in various aspects of online testing and the research, the Be Online conference is very interesting, and I drew upon these 3 people's talks to format mine today. And if you have any questions about anything I've presented today, here's my contacts and various discussion boards. Thank you.